some of the problems on your Graph and Solve Quadratic Inequalities worksheet. You will want to have Desmos open and ready to go because graphing these with technology will be required for quite a few of them, and it makes the problem a lot easier than trying to do it by hand. So here's the steps we're going to do to graph a quadratic inequality. It's going to look just like a quadratic equation, except for some shading. So first we'll graph the parabola that defines the boundary. And that's going to be just like if it had been y equals something x squared. And you will use a solid line for your parabola if it's less than or equal or greater than or equal, and a dashed line if it's y is less than or y is greater than. And then we will shade above the parabola if it's greater than or equal, and below if it is less than or equal. So shading below is what this example is showing, and it's a solid line. So here's an example, and they graph the boundary line, and then this one was dashed because it's just less than. And then the shading for this one is under and below, which is inside the parabola there because it was less than. And then you can use test points to check that you shaded the right region, but if you're using technology, Desmos will get that part correct for you. All right, so here is several problems that you're going to do. You're going to name the vertex just for some practice. You will say if the boundary line is dashed or solid, and then shade above or below. Now, you should be able to tell that from the graph once you graph it in here, but those are just to make sure that you realize what those answers should be. So there are graphs here. If you want to make the graph in Desmos and then recreate the graph over here if you're drawing by hand, that's okay, but you do need to be careful when you do that and make sure that you're looking carefully at the graph that technology helped you make. And you might have to change the scale on some of these. I just have from -10 to 10, so you might need something, and these are even less. So if these graphs don't match, feel free to recreate it if you're doing this by hand. Let's do number 2. So I'm going to use technology to graph y is less than -x squared minus 4x minus 1. So I check that this matches this, and then you want to make sure that you have a good view. So your scale of this should not be like in the hundreds, because then everything would just look super tiny. So this looks pretty good. You can change the colors if you want by clicking on this and then picking a different color. If you want to get creative and change your colors, you can do that. And it's a dashed line, so I would answer that it was dashed. I am shading below, so I would answer below. And then the vertex you can find, remember, just by clicking, and it is at -2, 3. You can use algebra to find the vertex too if you want to review how to do that. That would be good practice. And now I'm going to get a screenshot to paste here because I've decided I don't want to redraw this over here. I might make it look really sloppy. So you can either get a link. If you get a link, make sure that after you paste the link in there, you hit the space bar so that it becomes a live link. Otherwise, when I open your document, I won't be able to click on it. If you prefer to take a screenshot, I like snip and sketch, so I'm just going to, I think I'll copy the equation too so I can, or the inequality so I can see that. There it is, and now I will paste it right below there. And I could, if you wanted to delete this, if you want more room, that's fine too. It doesn't matter how much space you use if this is just a document that you're going to save and then attach. So don't forget to fill in these questions too. I didn't fill them in as I went, but you'll need to do that. On these next questions, all you need to do is graph. You don't have to answer the questions about what's the vertex, is it dashed or solid. All you need to do is make the graph and then attach it, or if you want to recreate the graphs on here, you can do that. All right, the next part's a little bit more complicated. It says that we are going to solve quadratic inequalities. So here's an example. What's the solution or the solution set for this inequality? So what we're going to do is graph two equations. or two functions. We're going to graph y equals this, and then on the next one, we're going to graph exactly what it looks like. So we're going to graph both because then it will show up in Desmos correctly. So let's do that before I show the next page. So y equals 2x squared plus 7x minus 4. And that's just going to be a solid parabola. And then on the next one, I'm going to graph 2x squared plus 7x minus 4 is less than 0. And what it did is it shaded in, there's like a narrow line here, and it shaded in everything between there. So let's see if it matches. Well, I used different colors when I did this before, but yes, that matches. But that's not the answer. So in those first few problems, the graph was pretty much all you had to do. But what we're going to do now is interpret this. We can see that the solution area is when x is in between -4 and 0.5. So the solution area, I wish I could draw on this. I can draw on this one over here. I will try to draw. It's not letting me. There we go. Okay, so pretend that this is from there. And the solution is in here. That part. So the solution is when x is in between -4 and 0.5. And you can write that different ways. You can write it like this with words. You can write it like this, or you can just put this part, that the solution is between -4 and 5. And how did I find that that was -4? Desmos will tell me that that's the x-intercepts. So this is when this inequality is less than 0. It's for this section right here. It's this. It's less than 0 for this part. Here's another one, another example. X squared minus 9x is greater than -18. First, we want to have 0. We want it equal to 0, or less than or greater than 0. So I'm going to add 18 to both sides, and then I get x squared minus 9x plus 18 is greater than 0. So I'm going to graph both of these inequalities at the same time in Desmos, both the y equals and the greater than 0 one. And when I do that, I see, again, that there are two different parts where there's solutions. This part, right? This is one part of the solution when x is less than 3. This is 3 right here. And the other part of the solution is when x is greater than 6 right here. This part of the solution. So you would have to write both parts in order to answer that one's question. And again, you can use words to answer it, or you can just do a simple inequality statement to write your answer. So let's look at some of these problems. Let's do number 5. So in number 5, we are going to graph y equals the right side there, or the left side, x squared plus 3x minus 28. And then the second related inequality is exactly this. Now, I saw that, whoops, some of you have been copying and pasting the equation, but you have to be really careful when you do that. That's fine if you can get out of the drawing thing. Yeah, stop drawing. It's stuck in drawing mode. Well, I'll just type it. When you copy and paste, sometimes it copies like the number 5 over with it. And it also doesn't copy the squared part. So it's probably best to just go ahead and type it in. Now, I don't have less than or equal on my keyboard, but Desmos has it on its keyboard right here. Okay, so now I can't see everything, so I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to change the scale just a little bit. I want to be able to have a nice picture there. that's a little better. All right, so I can see that this parabola is less than or equal to 0. That means below the x-axis down here. So when does that happen? That happens between -7 and 4. That's when this line is below the x-axis and in the shaded region. So we're looking for when is that line, that parabola, in the shaded region. So for an answer, I can write, you don't have to attach the graph here. Okay, I guess I'm going to draw it. I can write that this is between -7 and 0. And because this is less than or equal, it would also include those boundary points. So you can write it like that, or you can use words and say when x is between -7 and 0, including -7 and 0. It says you do not have to attach your graph for these problems. You can if you want. Let's look at one where, look at number 6. Number 6 is the same, almost, it is the exact same problem as this example. So you should be able to get that one correct for sure. Let's look at number 7 because it's not 0 by itself over here. So on this one, you would have to subtract 4 from both sides. And when I do that, I would get x squared minus 2x minus 3 is greater than or equal to 0. So my two related inequalities to graph would be x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals y, or y equals if you prefer. And then the second would be exactly as it appears in the problem now that we have got it 0 on one side by itself, greater than or equal to 0. And that will add the shading. Now this is one where it's when it's greater than 0 is here and here. So there's two places, but it's not in between them. So whenever x is less than or equal to -1, or when x is greater than 3, then the parabola lies in the correct region. So for your answer, you would write when x is less, and then because the reason it's less than or equal is because the problem said greater than or equal to 0, so we do include the boundary points then. Or x is greater than or equal to 3. That's the answer for number 7. And again, we don't have to include the graph. Note that on number 9, you'll have to subtract x from both sides to get 0. And then you have minus x, or minus 1x minus 1x. So this one is x squared minus 2x minus 3 is greater than 0 when you do the graph your inequalities. And there's only 10 problems to do. So they're all going to be done using technology. You don't even have to attach your graphs for 5 through 10. You do have to attach your graphs for 1 through 4. All right, that's it. Let me know if you have any questions and have a great day. Thank you.